Black woman humiliated at gala. What she did next shocked everyone. Imagine being in the most luxurious room of your life, surrounded by the wealthiest people, only to be humiliated in front of them all. But what would you do if you were in her shoes? The way she responded left an entire audience speechless, and it's a moment no one will ever forget. Subscribe to our channel now, so you don't miss more stories like this one, where true character is revealed in the most unexpected ways. Avery Marshall, a respected philanthropist whose encounter with discrimination at an exclusive event sparked a national conversation on race, respect, and the power of graceful resistance. On a crisp autumn evening in New York City, the annual Starlight Charity Gala was in full swing. The city's elite had gathered in the grand ballroom of the Celestial Hotel, a venue known for its opulent chandeliers and gilt-edged mirrors that reflected the shimmering gowns and polished shoes of attendees. Among them was Avery Marshall, a woman whose presence commanded attention not just for her elegant attire, but for the quiet confidence she exuded. Avery, a successful businesswoman and dedicated community leader, had been invited to speak about her groundbreaking work in urban education reform. As she made her way through the crowd, exchanging pleasantries and warm smiles, she couldn't help but notice the subtle glances and whispers that followed her. Being one of the few black women in attendance was something she was accustomed to, but it never ceased to remind her of the invisible barriers that still existed in these circles. As she approached the bar to get a glass of water, Avery overheard a conversation that made her pause. A group of executives, their faces flushed from expensive champagne, were engaged in a heated discussion about diversity initiatives in corporate America. One voice, louder than the rest, caught her attention. "It's all just for show," a man in an impeccably tailored suit declared. "These diversity hires, they're not really qualified. They're just here to fill a quota." Avery felt a familiar tightness in her chest, a mixture of anger and disappointment that she had learned to manage over the years. She was about to move away when the man's gaze fell upon her, and a smirk crossed his face. "Speaking of which," he said, loud enough for those around him to hear, "I wonder how our guest speaker tonight managed to secure her invitation. Surely it wasn't based on merit alone." The words hung in the air, sharp and cutting. The surrounding conversations hushed, and Avery found herself at the center of unwanted attention. In that moment, she had a choice to make, one that would define not just her evening, but potentially the course of her future work and the message she wanted to send to the world. As Avery took a deep breath, preparing to respond, she thought about all the times she had faced similar situations. She thought about the young girls in her community programs who looked up to her, about her parents who had taught her the value of dignity, and about the change she wanted to see in the world. With these thoughts anchoring her, Avery turned to face the man who had just insulted her. The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see how she would react. Avery's eyes met those of the executive, and for a moment, she saw a flicker of uncertainty cross his face. "Sir," Avery began, her voice clear and steady, carrying easily across the now silent room. "I believe you've made some assumptions about me that I'd like to address." She took a step closer, her posture straight and dignified. "My invitation to speak here tonight is indeed based on merit. The merit of 20 years dedicated to improving education in underserved communities, the merit of building bridges between corporations like yours and the neighborhoods they often overlook, and the merit of believing that every person, regardless of their background, deserves a chance to excel." The executive's smirk faded, replaced by a look of discomfort as Avery continued. "But more importantly, I'd like to address the broader implication of your statement. The idea that diversity and merit are somehow at odds with each other is not just misguided, it's harmful. It perpetuates a cycle of exclusion that has held back progress in boardrooms, classrooms, and communities across this nation." Avery's words resonated through the ballroom, and she could see nods of agreement from many of the guests. Even some of the executive's companions looked embarrassed, shifting awkwardly in their expensive shoes. "I stand here tonight not as a diversity hire or a token representative, but as a professional who has earned her place at this podium. And I invite you, sir, and anyone else who shares your view, to join me in a conversation about how we can create a world where merit is recognized regardless of the color of one's skin or their background." As Avery finished speaking, a moment of silence hung in the air before it was broken by applause. It started softly at first, then grew in volume as more and more attendees joined in. The executive who had made the offensive remark stood frozen, his face a mixture of shame and surprise. The host of the gala, sensing the significance of the moment, quickly made his way to Avery's side. "Ms. Marshall," he said, loud enough for all to hear, "I believe it's time for your speech. Would you do us the honor of taking the stage now?" Avery nodded graciously, accepting the host's arm as he escorted her to the podium. As she walked, she could feel the energy in the room had shifted. What had begun as an evening of superficial pleasantries had transformed into something more profound. She realized that her response to that moment of humiliation had opened a door, not just for herself, but for a deeper conversation about respect, equality, and the true meaning of merit in society. As Avery took her place behind the podium and looked out at the sea of faces, some supportive, some curious, some still processing what had just occurred, she knew that her prepared speech would have to wait. Tonight, she had a different message to deliver, one born from the crucible of that unexpected confrontation. She took a deep breath, ready to turn this moment of potential division into an opportunity for understanding and growth. "Good evening," Avery began, her voice strong and clear. "I'd like to talk to you tonight about the power of dignity, the importance of open dialogue, and the role each of us plays in creating a truly inclusive society. What we've just experienced is a microcosm of a larger issue that permeates our world. It's easy to dismiss such moments as isolated incidents, but they are symptomatic of deeper, systemic problems that we must address head-on. I stand before you not as a victim, but as a catalyst for change. Each of us in this room holds a position of influence, whether in business, politics, or philanthropy. With that influence comes responsibility. A responsibility to challenge our own biases and those of others, to create spaces where merit truly speaks louder than appearance, and to lead by example in fostering environments of respect and inclusion." Avery paused, allowing her words to sink in. She could see people leaning forward in their seats, their attention rapt. "My journey to this podium tonight was not an easy one. I've faced countless barriers, heard numerous whispers, and encountered many closed doors. But I've also been fortunate enough to meet allies and mentors who believed in the power of diversity, not as a checkbox to be ticked, but as a fundamental strength that drives innovation and progress." She glanced briefly at the executive who had insulted her earlier. He was now listening intently, his earlier bravado replaced by a look of contemplation. "To the gentleman who questioned my presence here tonight, I want to thank you." "You," Avery said, causing a ripple of surprise through the audience. "Your words, though hurtful, have provided us with an opportunity to confront uncomfortable truths, to engage in dialogue, and to grow. I extend an invitation to you, and to everyone in this room, to join me in this journey of understanding and change." As Avery continued her speech, she wove together personal anecdotes with hard facts about the benefits of diversity in the workplace and society at large. She spoke of the young people in her community programs, of their dreams, and the obstacles they faced. She challenged the audience to imagine a world where talent was nurtured regardless of its origin, where boardrooms and classrooms alike were enriched by a tapestry of diverse perspectives. "The work we do in our communities isn't just about helping the less fortunate," she explained. "It's about unlocking the potential that exists in every corner of our society. It's about creating pathways for brilliant minds that might otherwise be overlooked. And ultimately, it's about building a stronger, more innovative, and more just world for all of us." As she neared the end of her speech, Avery's voice took on a note of passionate urgency. "Tonight, I ask each of you to commit to being part of this change. Whether you're a CEO, an investor, or a community leader, you have the power to open doors, to challenge assumptions, and to create opportunities. Let this evening be a turning point, not just in words but in actions." She paused, looking out over the crowd. The room was silent, every eye fixed upon her. "I believe that the true measure of our society is not in how we treat those who are already privileged, but in how we elevate those who have been marginalized. Let us leave this gala tonight, not just with full bellies and emptied checkbooks, but with full hearts and a renewed commitment to building a world where dignity and opportunity are afforded to all. As Avery concluded her speech, the silence held for a moment before erupting into thunderous applause. People rose to their feet, their ovation a testament to the power of her words and the courage of her response to adversity. Even those who might have been skeptical at the beginning found themselves moved by her message. In that moment, as the applause washed over her, Avery realized that what had begun as a potential humiliation had transformed into something far more significant. She had not just stood up for herself. She had opened a door for countless others. As she stepped down from the podium, she knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter, not just in her life, but in the ongoing story of progress and equality in society. The rest of the evening unfolded in a whirlwind of conversations, handshakes, and promises of support. The executive who had insulted her approached with an apology and a request to learn more. Other attendees shared their own stories of discrimination and pledged to do better in their own spheres of influence. As Avery finally left the gala in the early hours of the morning, she felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. She knew that one speech wouldn't change the world overnight, but it was a start. And as she looked up at the stars twinkling over the New York skyline, she allowed herself a small smile. Tonight, dignity had won, and tomorrow, the real work would begin. As Avery stepped into the cool night air, the bustling sounds of New York City enveloped her. The contrast between the opulent gala she had just left and the everyday reality of the city streets struck her profoundly. She paused for a moment, allowing the events of the evening to settle in her mind. Her driver, Marcus, a kind-faced man in his 50s who had been with her for years, opened the car door with a warm smile. "How did it go, Ms. Marshall?" he asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. Avery sighed, a mix of emotions playing across her face. "It was transformative, Marcus, in ways I never expected." As they pulled away from the curb, Avery found herself recounting the evening's events to Marcus. He listened intently, occasionally nodding or shaking his head in response to her words. When she finished, he glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "You know, Ms. Marshall," he began, his voice thoughtful, "what you did in there, that's the kind of thing that changes lives. Not just yours, but so many others who might never even know your name." His words resonated with Avery, reminding her of the ripple effect that single actions could have. She leaned back in her seat, watching the city lights blur past the window, her mind already racing with ideas and possibilities. The next morning, Avery woke to find her phone inundated with messages, emails, and notifications. News of her speech had spread rapidly through social media and professional networks. There were interview requests from major news outlets, invitations to speak at corporate events, and messages of support from people around the world who had heard about what happened. But among all these messages, one stood out. It was an email from Jasmine, a young girl in Avery's mentorship program. The subject line read, "You're my hero, Ms. Marshall." With a lump in her throat, Avery opened the email. "Dear Ms. Marshall, I saw a video of your speech last night. My mom showed it to me. I've never been to a fancy gala, but I felt the way you must have felt when that man said those mean things. It happens at school sometimes, but watching you stand up and speak the way you did, it made me feel strong. Like maybe I could do that too someday. You showed me that our voices matter, that we don't have to be quiet when people try to put us down. Thank you for being brave. Thank you for showing me what dignity looks like. Your mentee, Jasmine." Tears welled up in Avery's eyes as she finished reading. This, she realized, was why she did what she did. It wasn't about galas or speeches or even changing the minds of powerful executives. It was about Jasmine and all the other young people who needed to see that they could stand tall in the face of adversity. With renewed determination, Avery began to plan her next steps. She knew that the spotlight she now found herself in was an opportunity, one she couldn't waste. She began drafting ideas for a new initiative, one that would bring together business leaders, educators, and community organizers to create real, tangible pathways for underrepresented youth to access opportunities in various industries. As she worked, Avery reflected on how a moment of humiliation had transformed into a platform for change. She thought about the executive who had insulted her, wondering if he truly understood the impact of his words and actions. She made a mental note to reach out to him, not with anger, but with an invitation to be part of the solution. The day flew by in a whirlwind of phone calls, meetings, and planning sessions. By evening, Avery had the outline of a program that she believed could make a real difference. She called it Dignity in Action, a multifaceted approach to combating discrimination and creating opportunities in professional spaces. As she finally allowed herself to relax that evening, Avery picked up a framed photo from her desk. It was a picture of her grandmother, a woman who had faced far greater challenges with unwavering grace and strength. "We did it, Grandma," Avery whispered to the photo. "We're making those small ripples that turn into waves." With a contented sigh, Avery turned to her window, looking out at the city skyline. She knew the road ahead would be challenging, that change wouldn't come easily or quickly. But she was ready for it, ready to face whatever came next with the same dignity and resolve she had shown at the gala. As the city lights twinkled against the darkening sky, Avery felt a sense of hope. Hope for Jasmine, for all the young people in our programs, and for a future where galas like the one she had attended would truly be spaces of equality and respect. With that hope burning bright in her heart, she turned back to her desk, ready to continue her work. The night was still young, and there was so much more to be done. As Avery settled back into her work, her phone buzzed with an incoming call. The screen displayed a name she hadn't expected to see: Charles Winthrop, the CEO of one of the largest corporations in the city and a regular attendee of the charity gala. With a mix of curiosity and apprehension, Avery answered. "Good evening, Mr. Winthrop." "Ms. Marshall." His deep voice resonated through the speaker. "I hope I'm not disturbing you at this hour." "Not at all," Avery replied, her tone professional yet cautious. "How can I help you?" There was a brief pause before Winthrop continued. "I was at the gala last night. Your speech, it was enlightening to say the least. It's made me realize that my company, despite our diversity initiatives, has been approaching this all wrong." Avery listened intently as Winthrop explained how her words had sparked intense discussions among his board members. He spoke of realizing the superficiality of their current efforts and the need for genuine, systemic change. "Ms. Marshall, I have a proposition for you," Winthrop said, his voice taking on an earnest quality. "We want to do better, to be better, and we believe you're the person to guide us. Would you consider taking on a role as our Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer?" The offer took Avery by surprise. It was a prestigious position at one of the most influential companies in the country. For a moment, she was tempted by the prospect of implementing change from within such a powerful organization. But as she glanced at the photo of her grandmother and thought of Jasmine's email, Avery knew her path lay elsewhere. "Mr. Winthrop, I'm honored by your offer," she began carefully. "But I believe I can make a greater impact by working independently, collaborating with multiple organizations rather than aligning with just one." She could hear the disappointment in Winthrop's voice as he responded, but also a note of respect. "I understand, Ms. Marshall. In that case, would you consider a partnership? We could fund your Dignity in Action program, provide resources and connections. In return, you could help guide our internal reforms and perhaps consult with other companies facing similar challenges." This proposition intrigued Avery. It was an opportunity to effect change on a larger scale while maintaining her independence. "That's an interesting proposal, Mr. Winthrop. I'd be open to discussing it further." They agreed to meet later in the week to hash out the details. As Avery hung up the phone, she felt a surge of excitement. This was how change happened, one conversation, one partnership at a time. Over the next few weeks, Avery's life transformed into a whirlwind of activity. News of her speech at the gala had gone viral, turning her into an unexpected icon of grace under pressure. Interview requests poured in from major networks, and invitations to speak at conferences and universities flooded her inbox. But Avery remained focused on her true mission. She used every platform she was given to speak about the Dignity in Action program, outlining her vision for a more inclusive and equitable professional world. Her partnership with Winthrop's company set a precedent, and soon other corporations were reaching out, eager to be part of the change. One afternoon, as Avery was preparing for a meeting, her assistant knocked on her office door. "Ms. Marshall, there's someone here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but, well, I think you might want to speak with him." Curious, Avery agreed to the impromptu meeting. As the door opened, she found herself face to face with the executive who had insulted her at the gala. The man who had inadvertently set this whole chain of events in motion. He stood awkwardly in the doorway, his usual confidence noticeably absent. "Ms. Marshall," he began, his voice tinged with remorse. "I owe you an apology, a real one, not just the hasty words I offered that night." Avery gestured for him to take a seat, her face neutral, but her eyes attentive. As the man spoke, pouring out his regret and his journey of self-reflection over the past weeks, Avery listened carefully. She could see the genuine struggle in his eyes, the painful process of confronting long-held biases and the desire to change. When he finished, Avery leaned forward, her gaze direct, but not unkind. "Thank you for coming here today," she said. "Your words at the gala were hurtful, yes, but they also opened a door that's leading to real change. The question now is, are you willing to be part of that change?" The man nodded, a mix of relief and determination on his face. "Yes, absolutely. I want to learn, to do better. I want to be part of the solution." A small smile crossed Avery's face. "Then let's talk about how you can contribute to dignity in action. Your experience, your journey, it could be valuable in helping others understand and overcome their biases." As they began to discuss possibilities, Avery felt a sense of things coming full circle. The man who had once tried to humiliate her was now sitting in her office, eager to join her cause. It was a powerful reminder that change was possible, that people could grow and learn. Later that evening, as Avery prepared to leave her office, she paused to look out at the city skyline once more. So much had changed in just a few short weeks, yet she knew this was only the beginning. There would be challenges ahead, resistance to overcome, and hard work to be done. But as she thought of Jasmine, of the countless others who would benefit from her efforts, and even of the executive who had found the courage to change, Avery felt ready for whatever lay ahead. She had turned a moment of humiliation into a movement for change, and she was determined to see it through. With a deep breath and a smile, Avery gathered her things and headed out. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, and she was ready to face them with the same dignity and resolve that had brought her this far. The journey ahead was long, but Avery Marshall was just getting started. As Avery stepped out of her office building, the crisp evening air filled her lungs, reinvigorating her after a long day. The city streets were alive with the usual bustle of New York at night, but to Avery, everything seemed different now. Each face she passed held a story, a potential for change, a reminder of why her work mattered. She decided to walk for a while, allowing the rhythm of the city to wash over her. As she strolled, her phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email from her old college professor, Dr. Elaine Thompson, a woman who had been a mentor and inspiration to Avery throughout her career. Finding a quiet bench in a nearby park, Avery sat down to read the message. "Dear Avery, I hope this email finds you well. I've been following your recent endeavors with great interest and pride. Your handling of the situation at the gala and the subsequent launch of Dignity in Action has been nothing short of inspirational. I'm reaching out because I believe your work aligns perfectly with a new initiative we're launching at the university. We're creating a center for inclusive leadership, aimed at preparing the next generation of business leaders to build and maintain truly diverse and equitable organizations. We would be honored if you would consider joining us as a guest lecturer and advisor for this program. Your real-world experience and the impact you're making could provide invaluable insights for our students. Let me know if you'd be interested in discussing this further. Regardless of your decision, please know that you continue to be a source of pride for all of us here. Warm regards, Dr. Elaine Thompson." Avery leaned back on the bench, a mix of emotions washing over her. The idea of influencing young minds, of shaping future leaders to prioritize inclusivity and respect was incredibly appealing. It felt like another piece of the puzzle falling into place. As she contemplated her response, Avery's gaze fell on a group of young people walking through the park. They were laughing, diverse in their appearances and backgrounds, seemingly without a care in the world. Yet Avery knew that each of them would face challenges in their futures, some perhaps similar to what she had experienced. In that moment, Avery made her decision. She would accept Dr. Thompson's offer. Education was key to long-term change, and this was an opportunity to plant seeds that would grow for generations to come. With renewed energy, Avery stood up and began walking again, this time with a clear destination in mind. She headed towards her old neighborhood, where her community center was located. It was late, but she knew there would still be activity there. Young people attending evening classes, community meetings wrapping up, volunteers preparing for the next day's programs. As she approached the center, warm light spilled from its windows onto the darkening street. Avery could hear the muffled sounds of laughter and conversation from inside. This place, this community, had been her foundation. Now, it would become a crucial part of her expanding vision. Pushing open the door, Avery was greeted by familiar faces, all showing surprise and delight at her unexpected visit. As she moved through the rooms, stopping to chat and share hugs, an idea began to form in her mind. This center, and others like it across the city, could serve as a bridge between the corporate world she was now influencing and the communities that needed opportunities the most. She found herself in the main hall, where a group of teenagers was finishing up a coding class. Avery watched them for a moment, seeing the pride on their faces as they showed off their projects to each other. These were the faces of the future, bright, diverse, full of potential. Clearing her throat, Avery called for everyone's attention. As the room quieted and all eyes turned to her, she felt a surge of purpose. "I have some exciting news to share," she began, her voice filled with warmth and enthusiasm. "We're about to embark on a new chapter for our community center. A chapter that's going to open doors and create opportunities like never before." As Avery outlined her plans, the partnerships with corporations, the university program, the expansion of their existing initiatives, she could see the spark of hope igniting in the eyes around her. This was more than just a program or an initiative. It was the beginning of a movement, one that started in this very community and was now reaching boardrooms and classrooms across the city. "But I can't do this alone," Avery concluded, looking around the room. "I need each and every one of you. Your experiences, your ideas, your passion. That's what will make this succeed. Together, we're going to show the world what dignity in action really looks like." The room erupted in cheers and applause. As Avery stood there, surrounded by the energy and excitement of her community, she felt a profound sense of coming full circle. The humiliation she had faced at the gala had been transformed into a catalyst for change, not just for her, but for all these people and countless others. As the night wore on and plans began to take shape, Avery realized that this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be challenging, but looking at the faces around her, young and old, all united in purpose, she knew that together they could overcome any obstacle. The future was bright, full of possibility, and Avery Marshall was ready to lead the way, one step at a time, with unwavering dignity and determination. As the excitement in the community center gradually settled into focused discussions and planning sessions, Avery found herself drawn to a quiet corner of the room. She watched as groups formed organically, each tackling different aspects of the new initiative. The sight filled her with a sense of pride and purpose. Jasmine, the young girl who had written the touching email, approached Avery with a tentative smile. "Ms. Marshall," she said, her voice a mix of nervousness and excitement, "I have an idea I'd like to share with you." Avery's face lit up with genuine interest. "I'm all ears, Jasmine. What's on your mind?" Jasmine took a deep breath before launching into her proposal. "I was thinking, what if we created a mentorship program where successful professionals from different backgrounds come to speak with us regularly? Not just as one-off events, but as ongoing relationships. They could share their experiences, the challenges they faced, and how they overcame them." Avery listened intently, nodding as Jasmine spoke. The young girl's idea was not only thoughtful, but aligned perfectly with the broader goals of dignity in action. "That's an excellent idea, Jasmine," Avery said warmly. "In fact, it could be a cornerstone of our program. It would provide real-world connections and inspiration for our youth, and it would also give professionals a chance to give back and stay grounded in the communities they came from." Encouraged by Avery's positive response, Jasmine's eyes sparkled with enthusiasm. "We could call it Bridges to Success or something like that. And maybe we could even have reverse mentoring, where we teach the professionals about our experiences and perspectives too." Avery couldn't help but smile at Jasmine's passion and insight. This was exactly the kind of engagement and initiative she had hoped to inspire. "Jasmine, I think you've just come up with a key component of our program. Would you like to take the lead on developing this idea further?" The young girl's eyes widened in surprise. "Me? Really?" "Absolutely," Avery affirmed. "You had the idea, and I believe you have the passion to make it a reality. I'll be here to guide and support you, but this can be your project to shape." As Jasmine beamed with newfound confidence, Avery realized that this moment, empowering a young person to take charge of their own idea, was the essence of what dignity in action was all about. It wasn't just about creating opportunities. It was about fostering leadership and self-belief in the next generation. The rest of the evening flew by in a flurry of activity. Ideas were shared, plans were sketched out, and a palpable sense of hope and determination filled the air. As the last of the attendees began to filter out, Avery found herself standing alone in the center's main hall, taking in the remnants of the night's energy. Her phone buzzed, breaking the silence. It was a message from Charles Winthrop, the CEO she had partnered with. "Ms. Marshall, I hope this message finds you well. I wanted to inform you that our board has unanimously approved a significant increase in funding for dignity in action. They were particularly impressed by the community engagement aspect. We're fully committed to this partnership and excited to see where your leadership takes us. Looking forward to our meeting next week to discuss next steps." Avery felt a surge of emotion as she read the message. It was validation that the corporate world was starting to understand the importance of genuine, community-driven change. But more than that, it was a reminder of how far she had come from that moment of humiliation at the gala. As she prepared to leave the community center, Avery paused at the bulletin board near the entrance. Pinned among the flyers and announcements was an old photograph of her grandmother, the woman who had taught her about dignity and perseverance. Avery touched the photo gently, a silent "thank you" to the woman who had shaped her values. Stepping out into the night, Avery took a deep breath of the cool air. The city that had once seemed so daunting now felt full of possibility. She knew there would be challenges ahead, resistance to change, setbacks, moments of doubt. But she also knew that she wasn't alone in this journey. As she walked home, Avery's mind was already racing with plans for the coming days. There were partnerships to solidify, curricula to develop, and most importantly, lives to impact. The path ahead was clear, and Avery Marshall was ready to walk it with the same dignity and determination that had brought her this far. The night sky above her seemed to twinkle with promise, each star a reminder of the countless individuals whose lives could be transformed by the work she was doing. And as Avery made her way through the bustling streets of New York, she carried with her the hopes and dreams of her community, the support of unexpected allies, and the unwavering belief that true change was possible. This was more than just a program or an initiative. It was the beginning of a movement, one that started with a single moment of courage and was now poised to reshape the landscape of opportunity and equality. And Avery, once the target of prejudice, now stood at the forefront of this transformation, ready to lead the way toward a more inclusive and dignified future for all. As Avery made her way through the bustling streets of New York, the weight of her newfound responsibility settled comfortably on her shoulders. Each step she took felt purposeful, as if she were walking not just for herself, but for every person who had ever faced discrimination or doubt. The city's cacophony of sounds, honking horns, distant sirens, the chatter of late-night pedestrians, seemed to fade into the background as her mind raced with possibilities. She thought about Jasmine and the other young people at the community center. Their faces, full of hope and determination, flashed through her mind. Avery realized that dignity in action wasn't just about creating opportunities. It was about nurturing dreams and fostering the confidence needed to pursue them. She made a mental note to develop a youth leadership council within the program, giving voices like Jasmine's a direct line to decision-making processes. As she waited at a crosswalk, Avery's gaze fell on a group of late-night office workers hurrying home. Their tired faces and slumped shoulders reminded her of the corporate world she was now influencing. She envisioned a future where these workers would return home energized, knowing their workplaces valued their unique perspectives and experiences. The Dignity in Action program could play a crucial role in reshaping corporate cultures, turning diversity from a buzzword into a lived reality. The walk signal turned green, and Avery strode forward with renewed purpose. Her mind turned to the upcoming meeting with Charles Winthrop and his board. She began mentally outlining a presentation that would not only showcase the program's potential, but also challenge these corporate leaders to become active participants in the change they claimed to support. She imagined workshops where CEOs and entry-level employees from underrepresented backgrounds could engage in honest, open dialogues about their experiences and expectations. As she turned a corner, the glittering lights of Times Square came into view. The massive billboards and neon signs seemed to pulse with energy, reminding Avery of the power of visibility and representation. She made a note to explore partnerships with media companies, envisioning campaigns that would showcase diverse success stories and challenge societal stereotypes. Perhaps they could create a documentary series following the journeys of Dignity in Action participants, from community centers to boardrooms. Passing by a university, Avery's thoughts shifted to education. Dr. Thompson's to collaborate on the Center for Inclusive Leadership felt like a crucial piece of the puzzle. She began to envision a comprehensive educational program that would span from elementary schools to executive education courses. It would teach not just the importance of diversity and inclusion, but provide practical skills for navigating and promoting inclusive environments. She imagined guest lecture series, internship programs, and research initiatives that would bridge the gap between academia and the real-world challenges of creating equitable spaces. As she neared her apartment building, Avery's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Marcus, her driver. "Ms. Marshall, I hope you don't mind me reaching out so late. I've been thinking about what you said about dignity in action, and I have an idea. Many of us drivers come from diverse backgrounds and have faced our share of challenges. What if we could somehow be part of your program? Maybe sharing our stories or mentoring young people interested in entrepreneurship." Avery's face lit up as she read the message. This was exactly the kind of grassroots engagement she had hoped to inspire. She quickly typed out a reply, inviting Marcus to meet with her to discuss his idea further. As she pressed send, she realized that Dignity in Action had the potential to touch lives in ways she hadn't even considered. Entering her apartment, Avery was too energized to sleep. She made her way to the small home office she had set up, flicking on the desk lamp and pulling out a fresh notebook. For the next few hours, she wrote feverishly, outlining plans, jotting down ideas, and sketching out possible organizational structures for the rapidly expanding initiative. She envisioned a multi-tiered approach, community engagement, building on the foundation of community centers like the one she had just left, creating hubs of empowerment and skill development across the city. Corporate partnerships, not just seeking funding, but actively engaging companies in reshaping their cultures and practices. This would include training programs, policy reviews, and ongoing support for inclusive leadership. Educational initiatives, from school programs teaching children about dignity and respect, to university partnerships preparing the next generation of leaders, to executive education courses challenging current leaders to think differently. Media and public awareness, campaigns to shift public perception and celebrate diverse success stories, making visibility a key tool in the fight against discrimination. Policy advocacy, using the collective voice of communities, corporations, and educational institutions to push for systemic changes at the local and national levels. As the first light of dawn began to peek through her window, Avery finally set down her pen. She leaned back in her chair, surveying the pages of notes and ideas spread before her. What had started as a response to a moment of humiliation had grown into something far beyond her initial imagination. Dignity in Action was poised to become a movement that could reshape the very fabric of society. Avery knew the road ahead would be challenging. There would be resistance, setbacks, and moments of doubt. But as she looked at the photo of her grandmother that sat on her desk, she felt a surge of determination. She was not just fighting for herself anymore, but for Jasmine, for Marcus, for countless others whose names she might never know, but whose lives could be transformed by this work. As the city outside her window began to stir with the start of a new day, Avery Marshall made a silent promise to herself and to all those who had believed in her. She would pursue this vision with every ounce of energy she possessed. She would face each challenge with the same dignity and resolve that had brought her this far. And she would not rest until Dignity in Action had created a world where no one would have to face the kind of humiliation she had experienced at that gala. With a deep breath, Avery stood up and walked to her window. The sun was rising over the New York skyline, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold. It felt like a new dawn, not just for her, but for the countless lives she was now poised to touch. As she watched the city come to life, Avery felt a profound sense of purpose and hope. This was more than just the beginning of a new day. It was the dawn of a new era, one where dignity, respect, and opportunity would be accessible to all. And Avery Marshall was ready to lead the way, one step at a time, with unwavering determination and an unshakable belief in the power of human dignity. As she prepared for the day ahead, Avery knew that each meeting, each decision, each conversation would be a step towards realizing this vision. The journey would be long, but she was prepared for it. For in her heart, she carried the strength of her grandmother, the hope of Jasmine, the support of unexpected allies like Charles Winthrop, and the dreams of countless others who were counting on her to succeed. With one last look at the rising sun, Avery turned away from the window, ready to face the day and the future it held. The time for reflection was over. Now was the time for action, and Avery Marshall was ready to show the world exactly what dignity in action truly meant. As Avery turned away from the window, her mind was already racing with the tasks that lay ahead. She quickly showered and dressed, choosing an outfit that radiated both professionalism and approachability, a balance she knew would be crucial in the days to come. As she sipped her morning coffee, she began prioritizing her day. First on the agenda was a conference call with her newly formed advisory board. This diverse group of individuals, ranging from community leaders to corporate executives, would be instrumental in shaping the direction of Dignity in Action. Avery had carefully selected each member, ensuring a wide range of perspectives and experiences. As she dialed into the call, Avery felt a surge of excitement. The faces that appeared on her screen represented a microcosm of the change she hoped to create. People from all walks of life, united by a common purpose. "Good morning, everyone," Avery began, her voice clear and confident. "Thank you all for joining me so early. We have a lot to discuss, and your insights will be invaluable as we move forward." For the next 2 hours, Avery led a dynamic discussion. Ideas flowed freely, challenges were identified and addressed, and a sense of shared purpose permeated the virtual meeting room. By the end of the call, they had outlined a comprehensive strategy for the first phase of Dignity in Action. As Avery ended the call, she felt energized by the collective enthusiasm of her team. She quickly jotted down the key points from the meeting, her mind already racing ahead to how these ideas could be implemented. Next on her schedule was a visit to a local high school. Avery had arranged to speak to a group of students about dignity in action and to hear their perspectives on the challenges they faced. As she entered the school auditorium, she was struck by the sea of young faces before her, each one full of potential, each one deserving of the opportunities she was working to create. Avery began her speech, sharing her own story of triumph over adversity. As she spoke, she could see the students leaning forward in their seats, their eyes wide with interest and hope. When she opened the floor for questions, hands shot up across the auditorium. One student, a young Latina girl with bright eyes and a determined expression, stood up. "Ms. Marshall," she began, her voice slightly shaky but gaining strength as she spoke, I want to be a scientist, but sometimes I feel like people don't take me seriously because of how I look or where I come from. How can I make them see past that?" Avery's heart swelled with empathy and determination. This was exactly why dignity in action was so crucial. She took a moment to collect her thoughts before responding. "First of all," Avery began, her voice warm and encouraging, "never let anyone make you doubt your abilities or your worth. Your dreams are valid, and you have every right to pursue them. What Dignity in Action aims to do is create a world where your skills and passion speak louder than any preconceived notions people might have." She went on to outline some of the initiatives they were developing: mentorship programs, STEM workshops for underrepresented youth, partnerships with research institutions to create more inclusive environments. As she spoke, she could see hope and determination blooming on the faces of the students. After the assembly, Avery stayed behind to speak one-on-one with students who had more questions. Each conversation reinforced her commitment to the cause, reminding her of the real, human impact of the work she was doing. As she left the school, Avery's phone buzzed with a message from Charles Winthrop. He wanted to meet earlier than scheduled to discuss an urgent matter. Intrigued and slightly apprehensive, Avery headed straight to his office. The sleek, modern interior of Winthrop Corp's headquarters was a stark contrast to the bustling high school she had just left. As she was ushered into Charles's office, Avery steeled herself for whatever news he might have. "Avery," Charles greeted her, his face serious but not unfriendly. "Thank you for coming on such short notice. I have some news that I think will be of great interest to Dignity in Action." He went on to explain that a major tech company, known for its lack of diversity, was facing a public relations crisis. They were looking for a partner to help them genuinely reform their corporate culture and hiring practices. "I've recommended that they work with Dignity in Action," Charles said. "This could be a game-changing opportunity to influence one of the biggest players in the industry." Avery's mind raced with the possibilities. This was a chance to create real, systemic change at a massive scale. But it would also be a challenge. The company's entrenched practices wouldn't be easy to shift. "It won't be easy," Avery mused, thinking out loud. "We'll need to approach this carefully. It's not just about changing their policies. It's about changing their entire corporate culture." Charles nodded in agreement. "That's why I thought of you, Avery. You have the vision and the integrity to make this work. What do you say?" Avery took a deep breath, weighing the opportunity. It would be a massive undertaking, but the potential impact was too significant to ignore. "Let's do it," she said firmly. "But on our terms. We're not here to be a PR band-aid. We're here to create real, lasting change." As she left Charles's office, Avery's mind was already formulating a strategy. This partnership could serve as a model for corporate transformation, setting a new standard for the industry. The rest of the day flew by in a whirlwind of meetings, phone calls, and planning sessions. By the time evening fell, Avery felt as though she had lived a week in a single day. But rather than feeling exhausted, she felt invigorated. As she walked home through the city streets, Avery reflected on the day's events. From the early morning strategy session to the inspiring high school visit, from the unexpected opportunity with the tech company to the countless small interactions in between, each moment had reinforced her commitment to dignity in action. She thought about the young Latina girl who dreamed of being a scientist, about Marcus and his idea for driver mentorship, about Jasmine and her Bridges to Success program. She thought about the executives at the gala who had underestimated her, and about the countless others who faced similar prejudices every day. Dignity in Action was no longer just a respo, NSE to a moment of humiliation. It had become a movement, a force for change that had the potential to transform lives, institutions, and society itself. And Avery Marshall was at the helm, guiding this movement with unwavering determination and an unshakable belief in the power of human dignity. As she reached her apartment, Avery paused to look up at the night sky. The stars twinkled faintly against the city's glow, reminding her of the vastness of the task ahead. But rather than feeling daunted, she felt inspired. Each of those stars represented a life that could be touched, a dream that could be realized, a barrier that could be broken. With renewed energy, Avery entered her home and headed straight for her office. There was still work to be done, plans to be made, strategies to be refined. The day may have been long, but the journey was just beginning. And Avery Marshall was ready for every step of it, armed with the strength of her convictions and the power of dignity in action. As she settled in her chair and opened her laptop, Avery felt a sense of purpose that ran deeper than anything she had ever experienced. She knew that the road ahead would be challenging, filled with obstacles and setbacks. But she also knew that she wasn't walking this road alone. She had the support of her community, the commitment of unexpected allies, and the hopes and dreams of countless individuals who were counting on dignity in action to create a more just and equitable world. With fingers poised over the keyboard, Avery began to type, outlining her vision for the future. Each word was a step forward, each idea a building block in the foundation of change. As the night deepened around her, Avery Marshall continued to work, fueled by the knowledge that with every action, every decision, every moment of perseverance, she was bringing the world one step closer to a future where dignity and opportunity were not privileges, but rights accessible to all. The story of dignity in action was still being written, and Avery was determined to make it a tale of triumph, transformation, and the enduring power of the human spirit. As the first light of a new day began to creep across the sky, Avery finally leaned back in her chair, a smile of satisfaction on her face. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new chances to make a difference. And she was ready for all of it, armed with the unshakable belief that dignity, when put into action, could change the world. As the first rays of sunlight began to filter through her office window, Avery realized she had worked through the night. Yet, instead of feeling exhausted, she felt invigorated. The plans she had outlined during those quiet hours held the potential to transform countless lives. She quickly freshened up and changed, ready to dive into another day of relentless action. Her first appointment of the day was a breakfast meeting with a group of potential investors. As Avery entered the upscale restaurant, she couldn't help but remember the gala where she had faced such humiliation. But now, she walked in with her head held high, knowing that she was here not as a guest, but as a leader with a vision that was already changing lives. The investors, a diverse group of individuals from various industries, listened intently as Avery outlined the goals and strategies of dignity in action. She spoke passionately about the programs they had already implemented and the partnerships they were forming. As she detailed the potential return on investment, not just financially, but in terms of social impact and corporate culture transformation, she could see the excitement growing in their eyes. Ms. Marshall, one of the investors, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, spoke up. I've been in this business for 3 decades, and I've seen countless initiatives come and go. What makes dignity in action different? How can you ensure long-term, sustainable change? Avery appreciated the directness of the question. She took a moment to gather her thoughts before responding. The key difference, she began, her voice steady and confident, is that we're not just addressing symptoms. We're targeting the root causes of inequality and discrimination. We're creating a holistic approach that encompasses education, corporate culture, community empowerment, and policy change. But most importantly, we're putting the power in the hands of the people most affected by these issues. She went on to explain how programs like Jasmine's Bridges to Success and Marcus's Driver Mentorship Initiative were empowering individuals to become agents of change in their own communities. She detailed their partnerships with educational institutions and corporations, emphasizing how these collaborations were creating pathways for underrepresented individuals to access opportunities they had previously been denied. By the end of the meeting, the investors were not just convinced. They were eager to be part of the movement. As Avery left the restaurant, she had secured not only financial backing, but also a network of influential allies committed to the cause. Her next stop was a community center in one of the city's most underserved neighborhoods. Dignity in Action was launching a pilot program there, offering everything from job training and financial literacy classes to mental health support and legal aid. As Avery walked through the doors, she was greeted by a buzz of activity. In one room, a group of teenagers was engaged in a coding workshop, their faces lit up with excitement as they learned skills that could open doors to careers in tech. In another, adults of all ages were participating in a resume writing class, gaining the tools they needed to present their skills and experiences effectively to potential employers. Avery paused to chat with some of the participants, listening to their stories and gathering feedback on the programs. Each conversation reinforced her commitment to the cause, reminding her of the real, human impact of their work. As she was about to leave, a young man approached her hesitantly. "Ms. Marshall," he said, his voice quiet but determined. "I just wanted to thank you. I've been struggling to find work for months, but after just a week in this program, I've already landed 2 interviews. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I have a real shot at building a better future for myself and my family." Avery felt a lump form in her throat. This was why she had created Dignity in Action, to give people hope, to empower them to take control of their own destinies. She thanked the young man for sharing his story, promising to keep fighting to create more opportunities for people like him. As she left the community center, Avery's phone buzzed with a message from her assistant. The tech company that Charles Winthrop had mentioned was ready to meet to discuss a potential partnership. Avery quickly made her way to their headquarters, her mind already formulating strategies for how Dignity in Action could help transform their corporate culture. The meeting was intense. The company's executives were clearly uncomfortable, aware of the public relations crisis they were facing, but unsure how to address the deep-seated issues within their organization. Avery listened to their concerns, then laid out a comprehensive plan for change. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice firm but not confrontational, "what we're proposing isn't just a quick fix for your PR problem. We're offering you the opportunity to become industry leaders in diversity and inclusion. This will require a fundamental shift in your corporate culture, from your hiring practices to your leadership development programs to the very way you approach innovation." She went on to outline a multi-year plan that included unconscious bias training for all employees, mentorship programs for underrepresented Senate groups, partnerships with diverse educational institutions, and a complete overhaul of their hiring and promotion practices. As she spoke, she could see the executives' discomfort gradually giving way to interest and even excitement. By the end of the meeting, they had agreed to move forward with the partnership. It would be a challenging process, Avery knew, but the potential impact was enormous. If they could successfully transform one of the biggest players in the tech industry, it could set a new standard for the entire sector. As evening fell, Avery found herself back in her office, reviewing the day's events and planning for the challenges ahead. She thought about the investors who had pledged their support, the community members whose lives were already being changed, the corporate executives who were finally ready to confront the issues within their organization. Each of these interactions represented a step forward, a small victory in the larger battle for equality and dignity. But Avery knew that the work was far from over. There would be setbacks, resistance, and moments of doubt. Yet as she looked out at the city skyline, she felt a sense of hope and determination stronger than ever before. Dignity in Action was more than just a program or an initiative. It was a movement, a force for change that was already beginning to reshape the landscape of opportunity in the city. And it was growing, gaining momentum with each passing day. As Avery settled in for another late night of work, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the challenges that had led her to this point, for the people who believed in her vision, and for the opportunity to make a real difference in the world. She opened her laptop and began to type, outlining plans for the next phase of Dignity in Action. There were more partnerships to forge, more programs to develop, more lives to touch. The road ahead was long, but Avery Marshall was ready for the journey. With each word she wrote, each idea she developed, she was bringing the world one step closer to a future where dignity and opportunity were not just ideals, but realities for all. As the night deepened around her, Avery continued to work, fueled by the knowledge that with every action, every decision, every moment of perseverance, she was helping to create a world where no one would have to face the kind of humiliation she had experienced. A world where everyone, regardless of their background or circumstances, would have the chance to stand tall, to be heard, and to pursue their dreams with dignity. The story of Dignity in Action was still unfolding, and Avery was determined to make it a tale of triumph, of transformation, and of the enduring power of the human spirit. As she worked into the early hours of the morning, She knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities. But she was ready for all of it, armed with her unwavering commitment to dignity, equality, and the belief that one person's determination could spark a movement capable of changing the world.